Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Yesterday, my opponent resigned on move 13 after getting their queen pinned by my rook. This was a relatively short game where I played the Grand Prix Attack in response to my opponent's Sicilian Defense. At the beginner intermediate level, and both my opponent and I were in the 1300s in this rapid 30-minute game, I find really good success with the Grand Prix. I suspect that many people who play the Sicilian might simply not expect it, and so risk making some inaccurate moves. Please enjoy! Okay, so let's start with a review. So short game, and because I didn't really make any errors in this game, got a very high accuracy. My opponent did make some inaccuracies and mistakes, and so rated no, had a lower accuracy. And we'll see in the context of the analysis where things went wrong for the opponent. Let's now move on to the analysis. I had white in his match, as usual, e4. An opponent played c5 at the beginning of the Sicilian defense. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I played a Grand Prix attack, which is usually how I respond to the Sicilian. So knight c3, opponent plays another move, and then generally f4. It's a Grand Prix attack. Opponent plays e6. Here I play sort of a bishop c4, or that knight move right away is good as well. And here the opponent plays queen h4 with check. But the opponent doesn't really have anything because block with counterattack. The opponent can't take that pawn because obviously it's defended, can't retreat back here, doesn't really make sense to retreat there because you sort of block the development of your knight. And in fact, your opponent retreated the queen all the way back to e7, which is to equality. But you will see actually the best move for the opponent is in fact moving the queen all the way to d8. That actually gives black a slight advantage, and the slight advantage I think is by inducing potentially a long-term weakness by forcing me to play that pawn move, and that potentially is a rationale on why to play knight f3 first before the bishop in this situation, because it blocks the queen move and the induction of that slight weakness. However, it doesn't really make much of a difference. We're both pretty equal either way. However, as we will see, the lining up of the king and queen in that formation causes a long-term potential problem, a long-term target that I end up exploiting. Now, a knight f3, a6. Here I play a4, even though that wasn't the best move. So opponent, the stockfish reckons just moving the bishop right away to basically avoid having to face b5. Now in this case, I thought it would be better to play this because if they play that, captures, threatening the knight, and also can't capture back as the rook would then be hanging. Opponent now plays b6, which was interesting, and while I wasn't expecting that. Here, short castles, and basically part of the idea of the Grand Prix attack is potentially, especially if the king ends up castling a kingside, these pieces all potentially form an attack on the king side here. Opponent now Sophian Ketos their bishop b7, which was apparently quite a good move, and this sort of opens up the opponent to castle queenside. And given my setup is really more designed for a kingside attack, that's potentially a pretty good idea. Here, however, I saw the queen and a king in a line. Potentially, there's something here, but first I need to clear out. Open up the center of the board. And so here was a question. Are they going to capture? Because it looks very tempting. They do capture, and you can see +4. So that was a mistake for the opponent, because me capturing there isn't particularly good. They can capture back with one of the pawns. And here, of course, I will capture back. And here the opponent makes a mistake. It doesn't see the impending pin and how problematic that is. So they develop a knight. Now, the reason why this knight move would have been better is because it opens up the diagonal for that fianchettoed bishop. So at the moment, that bishop is locked behind that knight. But once that opens up, potentially that bishop now has a bit of extra space. So they play the knight, and unfortunately now, see, great move, almost +6. And what is the opponent going to do? And he actually, if you see Stockfish understands that that queen is simply lost and just recommends a knight move for further development. That queen is lost. I suppose the opponent could always just trade like that as well, but of course I wouldn't capture back with check, so that's potentially not so good either. In this game, however, the knights valiantly try to protect their queen, block, but it doesn't work. Capture, the pin is still there. Try to block again, and maybe with discovered attack, doesn't work. Because again, and both these squares are why this works is whoops. Both of those squares were defended by my knight. So the queen can't simply, no, they could take, but it would be captured back with a knight. And in this position, the opponent, rather than losing the queen, the king falls on their sword, saves their queen effectively, and they chose to resign and almost +15. So good game, a short game, GG. So what went wrong for my opponent? Firstly, the early queen h4 with check on move 4 wasn't an effective attack, with the queen forced immediately to retreat after blocking and counterattacking with a pawn move g3. My opponent lost tempo, and more than that, retreating the queen to e7 set up the downstream risk of having the queen pinned. Later, allowing the pawn trade and opening up the center of the board before castling placed the king at risk of an attack. And lastly, when the queen was pinned, loss aversion meant that rather than accepting that the queen's fate was unavoidable, the attempts to unpin first with one knight and then the next resulted in a catastrophic loss of material. I hope you found this game interesting, and thanks for watching.